RBI in a press release has imposed some restrictions on Paytm Payments Bank. Posts on the subject have put hashtag Paytm right at the top on the trending section on X, formerly known as Twitter. Now, all kinds of information is being shared, and this seems to have caused some panic among users and shareholders. Now, if you're a Paytm user or a shareholder or both, this must have got your attention as well. To help us understand what this means, the potential impact, I'm joined by Lloyd Matthias, a board member, independent director, and advisor to companies in the technology and consumer space, and also an investor. Mr. Matthias, thank you so much for taking out the time so late in the night and talking to us.
My pleasure, Abhishek. Thank you for having me.
All right, quickly, before we get into the nitty-gritties and the details of the notice, the press release, which I'm sure you must have seen by now, just sort of give us a lowdown of what has happened and how serious is this, and how different it is from the restrictions which RBI imposed on the payment bank a couple of years ago.
I think the wording of the RBI circular, I think, was very, very stringent. So I think in any which way one looks at it, the issue is serious. Basically, what RBI has done is put out a circular clearly stipulating and preventing Paytm Payments Bank from accepting deposits or top-ups in customer accounts, including wallets, FASTags, effective February 29th. So it gives a whole month, but effectively, for that entire 29 days, I mean, at the end of 29 days, what it tells anyone is that there is a big issue, right? And of course, they've kind of detailed the areas, saying that way back in February 2022, they had asked for a full-fledged system audit and from external auditors. And basis what they saw in the compliance validation report of the external auditors, it revealed what RBI calls persistent non-compliances and continued material supervisory concerns in Paytm Payments Bank that warranted kind of supervisory action, right? So I think it's kind of a fairly, almost a kind of whole year. And therefore now taking on very stringent action with very strong words like not allowing for any transactions beyond February 29, I think, sends out a very, very strong warning. So I think this is far more stringent. I know that 2 years back, another payments bank, in a sense, fell foul of the RBI. But everything about the wording of this kind of makes it far more critical. And therefore, obviously, a concern. And also given the depth and penetration of Paytm. I mean, it is, in a sense, at least in large parts of the country, one of the largest digital payment mechanisms. And of course, the payment, the 197, the payment, the owning company, kind of runs Paytm. But I think they're interlinked because fundamentally everything that Paytm does happens through Paytm Payments Bank. So I think this is a big concern for users.
Right. And in terms of the number of restrictions which have been imposed, from the point of view of users, we can talk about shareholders perhaps a little later. But in terms of users, what kind of restrictions are we looking at?
I think what the bank is saying is that virtually you cannot make any fresh deposits, which really tells the users that the bank, the Paytm Payments Bank is under watch. And what it really means is that it also gives current users a sense of discomfort, that the fact that RBI is very clearly putting out a mandate that you cannot put any fresh deposits. The only thing that can go into the account is, let's say, your cashbacks and interest payments where the Paytm Payments Bank is linked. So that obviously is incoming money. I think sends a bit of a dire warning. And what I fear, until some quick action is announced the next day or two, is that it puts a lot of users, makes them very wary. It's the equivalent of a big red flag, and this is the country's banking regulator raising the red flag. And specifically also it talks clearly about issues of non-compliance, right? So I think really all these indicators will actually send a very strong signal to users, and that is a big danger. So this could severely disrupt Paytm's existing operations, but the bigger concern is it could also spill over into its offline merchant business as well as its gateway business, right? You know that you can kind of make any transaction, pay from anywhere through, the Paytm gateway, through the offline merchants. Paytm is possibly one of the largest, if not the most dominant payment gateway. When you go to any store, you have a Paytm POP device where you can make payments to. So I think that is going to be pretty critical, and therefore, for all practical purposes, it kind of for now ends the operation of Paytm Payments Bank, right? So this is definitely a negative development, and it also adds to the relatively heavy regulatory overhang on the Paytm business. Uh, the concern, therefore, is for existing customers who have money in their balances. If they transfer money out, it's the kind of equivalent of a small run, which I think is a big concern.
Right. So let me try to break it down in terms of the services that Paytm provides. So, for instance, FASTag, as far as FASTag is concerned, users, customers, existing customers have been asked to extinguish their balances, and they will not be able to use this instrument with more money beginning
March
March.
1st.
Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Right. Yeah.
All right. And you were also talking about QR cards and QR payment. So what about that?
Yeah. So I think essentially what it's saying is that after Feb 29th, effective March 1st, even those transactions will be dicey because eventually it's really about the linkage that Paytm provides as a payment gateway to your bank account. Now, if they're really saying that you can't deposit any money, in that sense, it closes out all the banking operations part of Paytm Payments Bank. What's really left is the gateway. But I think the two are too closely interlinked, so there's a very likely spillover. Obviously, what you're talking about is there's still a whole month for hopefully things to resolve. I mean, I think it's going to be, that's going to be critical. But effectively, for a lot of users right now, it sends a signal that not's all well with Paytm Payments Bank. And users who can't distinguish the difference between the payments bank and the payment gateway business may see eventually both owned by us with the same entity, 197 Communications, I think might tend to avoid and possibly migrate to other payment gateways. So it's bound to have an impact. Similarly, for merchants, a lot of merchants that have the Paytm POP, I think will be a little wary and concerned about whether something can go wrong. When it comes to monies, people tend to be doubly careful. So I think it's going to have a cascading spillover effect into other aspects of their business. They also have, in a sense, an e-commerce business. In fact, I think Paytm is pretty significant when it comes to ONDC as a platform. So they have that. But I think it's a kind of red flag that tends to have a cascading business. Much like, when a bank is in trouble, red flags are raised, and then suddenly everyone's going to withdraw all his monies. I think that same impact is happening. And since the common brand runs through the range of Paytm's financial services, uh, I think there is going to be definite discomfort if some things don't get resolved in a hurry.
All right. And what happens in case your Paytm app is linked to your bank account with the payments bank?
I think for now, anything that's coming into the account one way will come in. But clearly, what RBI is saying is you can't deposit anything else after February 29th. So there is this 29-day interim. Like I said, one hopes in this period, Paytm is able to resolve some level of issues. But I said in the short, there is going to be that big concern. And if there's no resolution over the next 29 days, I think we're looking at pretty much, very, very clear action. So Paytm Payments Bank has to stop onboarding new customers with immediate effect, I think from March 1st. And I think that's only going to make it very, very difficult. Of course, there are today large payment gateway services. So a lot of that business can migrate effortlessly. But when it comes to the depth and the range of POP devices, the penetration that Paytm has, I think that will take some time to overcome. And that will definitely cause a lot of customer discomfort. So I think that 29-day window is hopefully where the gap can be filled should Paytm not be able to resolve this current mess.
Yeah, right. But it seems UPI will continue to work. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. I think the UPI will continue to work. So there's no concern on that because that's really just a gateway mechanism. So as long as you're linked to a bank account, I think that part works. But any fresh transactions where you're using Paytm specifically as an endpoint, I think that's where the issue comes in. As a pass-through, for now, no problem. Though, like I said, psychologically, there is a lot of both merchants and users who are going to be a little wary.
And the restriction in terms of onboarding of new customers, that will seriously impact Paytm. So what is the course of action which is left for Paytm to take after this?
I think for one, immediate, kind of meeting up with the banking officials to really understand what are the issues. and maybe a kind of commitment or a promise to see how things can be resolved with one. Of course, I don't think they will resort to the legal recourse for now, because you're talking of the banking regulator, which is pretty much the end point when it comes to this. So I think secondly is also the course correction, because I think what RBI's circular points to the fact is this is not a one-off decision. There has been concerns that RBI has pointed out first way back in February 2022, right? So there is a regulatory overhang, and I think a part of this has kind of been understood by the system. We saw it in the case of another fairly large payment bank ecosystem backed by a telco. So there has been concern, and clearly, I think RBI is also recognizing, as much as India's digital uh, public infrastructure and digital payments infrastructure, thanks to the NPCI, has gone places. I think there are concerns that they need to see that all the operators work with the same stringency, with the same regulatory controls that the banks do. And to be fair, I think both our public sector banks and our large private banks, work pretty much to the gold standard. So I think RBI has to really ensure that the rest of the payment ecosystem, and of course, payments banks are also effectively banks, but also work on the same stringency that happens with large banks.
Also, as you were mentioning earlier, the Paytm brand is common. Do you see some impact on the share price?
I think certainly. I think any issue which has mega consumer impact, which is bound to be in the news in the papers, I think will make shareholders wary. Of course, there is clearly one dominant shareholder in the case of Paytm, and they've been in business long enough. I think they've demonstrated the viability of their core business model for a considerable period of time. Their depth of penetration, I think, has been quite remarkable. The fact that they've moved into adjacent spaces from e-commerce to other aspects, I think has been good. But there is going to be concern. I have little doubt. There will be. I mean, it's a listed entity, and therefore there is bound to be a fair amount of panic in the markets, and there is going to be an impact on the stock price.
All right. On that note, thank you so much.